As mentioned, thank you again for joining. My name is Mahesh Narayanan, and I'm one of the venture partners at Newchip, as well as the CEO of PepVax. And I would like to introduce the rest of our panelists today. I'll start with just clockwise with who I have. So we have Dr. Paul Peter Tack, and he's the board director at Sitryx Therapeutics and Levicept. And he's also part of flagship pioneering. We also have Dr. Chang, who is a principal at FC Capital. FC Capital focuses on life science investments, both in the United States and globally, and looking at medical and healthcare investments. And Dr. Chang leads the leadership role in the full life cycle of the investments, from evaluation all the way to post investments. And Mr. Nat Brinn is a partner at VC23 and has a very successful track record of over 30 years of private investments, acquisitions, and business management. So I'll give it to Dr. Tack. If you can just go ahead and give a little bit more about the background, then we'll go to Dr. Chang and then Mr. Brinn. So Dr. Tack, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks for inviting us today, Mahesh. I'm Paul Peter Tack. I'm a physician. I'm a physician scientist. I've treated patients for many years, decades, in fact. And at some point, I decided to move on to the pharmaceutical industry to have a bigger impact on larger numbers of patients. And I joined GSK, GlaxoSmithKline, first to become the global head of R&D for immunoinflammation, so everything in autoimmunity. So think of gastroenterology, dermatology, rheumatology, clinical immunology, etc. And later, I also oversaw R&D in oncology and infectious diseases. And I became the development head for GSK and the chief immunology officer, and created a big pipeline in immunology and oncology, which is still, I think, the major focus of the company right now, rightly so, I would say. And then I thought, well, it would be great experience actually to join the biotech ecosystem in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I joined Flagship Pioneering as a venture partner, and also from the beginning led a company called Sitryx Therapeutics, which focuses on the interconnected biology of the gut. I prioritized oncology and neurosciences. And at this moment, I focus on my role as a board member of 3 companies. First, Sitryx Therapeutics, which I co-founded, which is based in Oxford in the UK, with a focus on immunometabolics, hot area in immunology. Second, a Medici company based in London called Levicept. It's a mono asset company. So that model is kind of the opposite of the Flagship Pioneering model, which is truly interesting. And the third biotech company that I focus on, I cannot disclose at this moment because we've not announced it. So I have a mixed background. And before that time, I have been a professor of medicine for many years at the University of Amsterdam.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Tack. Dr. Chan?
Great. Yes, this is Shaoyu, and I'm currently serving as principal for FC Capital, as mentioned. And also, I came from a medical background as well. So hats off to Paul. I received my medical training and license from Taiwan, and I came to the US to study public health. It was in 08, 07, and with a master's in public health, I started working in the US, and first in academia, and gradually transitioned into the industry. And for the past 6 years, I've been working in the biotech investment and entrepreneur world, and working as venture capital for the past 3 years. And right now, using my medical profession and also the connections I've built in the greater Boston area and across the US, I'm able to help my company source good deals and also closely monitor our overseas portfolio. A quick background on FC Capital. This is a relatively new VC, started in 2017. And right now we are managing equivalent of 150 million US dollars. And we are focusing on healthcare. And we have right now a portfolio of 20 companies, and the majority of them are in China. However, we also have 3 portfolio companies here in US and also 2 in Europe. So I'm also in charge of going to board meetings and also listen to companies' management team and helping them direct their global strategy. And we look at everything from biopharmaceutical to medical device diagnostics and digital health. So pretty much everything under the healthcare umbrella. And typically we participate in early venture stage, usually Series A or B rounds.
Great, thank you so much. And Nat, could you go ahead and describe yourself as well as VC23?
Sure. Thanks, Mahesh. Thanks for including me. So my name is Nat Brinn. I'm a partner at both Vital Venture Capital and VC23. Vital built a portfolio of 22 companies, mostly life science, is in the harvesting mode of them. And VC23 is my newer company. Over the last couple of years, we've started to build another portfolio. We've made investments in 5 companies thus far, and plan to have 20 or 25 or more companies in that portfolio over time as well. We invest in very early stage. We're usually first non-friends and family money, and then we invest ongoing. We do a lot of tools and tech platforms in the biospace, notably 10x Genomics and Twist Biosciences, both public companies now. We were the first money in those companies. Quantalife, Axiomics, Ginkgo Bioworks, a synthetic biology company, Galt. So a number of tools and what I call hardware platforms. Then in diagnostics, we've made a number of investments in platform diagnostic technologies like CD Diagnostics, which is now part of Zimmer, exited to them, and more recently Tangent Biosciences, which is a molecular diagnostics portable point of care isothermal lamp-based technology. And limited amount of therapeutics. We've invested in 1 gene therapy company called Tally Bio, which is now part of Spirovant, I should say. But we'll look for unique therapeutic opportunities as well. Quite interested in basically anything and everything that's going on in the bio world at an early stage, and look forward to the discussion.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So let's kind of jump into the first question I really had, which is looking at the situation that we're in with COVID-19. Maybe biotech industry is probably the one of the least affected in terms of investments kind of moving in and moving forward. But still, there are a lot of companies that are struggling to raise funds. At the same time, I see quite a lot of companies moving forward with IPOs. So I just wanted to see, what your thoughts are for life science companies and investments in general moving forward. Where's the money coming from? Where is it going? And what type of companies should be expecting to get more funding? And where is the next set of companies that will be receiving funding? So this very general question of investments in general in life sciences. So we'll start with Nat and kind of go backwards this time. So Nat, happy to hear your thoughts on where you think investments are heading towards life sciences.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think in this current pandemic environment, things are different. But the good news for early stage biotech companies is, in my view, things are moving forward. A lot of venture players have funds that they want and in fact need to deploy under timetables for fund structures. And they're active. So I'm seeing a lot of companies get funded. We funded several already during the pandemic. And I think it's still an active environment. The negative is that, especially for existing companies that have products out there already, which fortunately for early stage companies, it can take a couple of years. And so you're not really worried about the current environment. You're thinking about the future environment. But, for those that have commercial products already, although lots of life science sectors are active, some labs, as you all know, are either inactive or operating on a limited basis. So, there is this current near-term issue of our customers, doing all their projects at the normal timetables, or have they scaled back? And that's impacting some of the companies that we see that are actually in the commercial sales stage.
Dr. Chang?
Yeah, I guess I can speak to some of the elements of foreign investment right now. And as we also see, like across all sectors, healthcare is probably one of the less impacted sectors in all industries. And we have seen quite a lot of IPOs during this period. And also funds are getting closed. They have fresh capital, so they are ready to deploy. But I think due to the political climate, especially between US and China, I've already seen quite a lot of Chinese funds. They are pulling back from the US market. They are just unwilling to invest here because of all the regulations, and also there are scrutiny from both US side and from China side. So I think that will be ongoing. And of course, for many Chinese funds, once they have a US dollar fund, they are ready to deploy. So whether it's within the US or maybe they will go to Canada or Europe to invest, they might be an option, but they will continue to deploy the capital. But I've also seen many China funds, they are now focused more on Asia. So either on their domestic market in China, trying to cultivate their own startups on the ground, or they would just look less outward and less into US or Europe in general.
Okay, thank you. And Dr. Kat?
Yeah, to build on what we just heard, it's clearly a disruptive period, right? There's a lot of money that needs to be deployed. But I've also seen that some investors postpone their decisions, in particular when they are active on both the public and the private markets. And they want to secure first the companies that they have started to invest in already in the past. They postpone some new investment. But at some point, the money will need to go somewhere. And I think in the end, this COVID-19 pandemic is probably going to be good for the biotech ecosystem. Because first, long-term investments in this field are quite beneficial and positive, I think. And second, the solution for this huge problem will need to come from biomedical research. And society will see that. And I think the investments that will go into that direction will probably go up rather than down. So I'm quite optimistic, although there's clearly a short-term disruption at the moment. And then where does the money come from? Well, the money will continue to come from traditional biotech venture capital. But I would expect that more and more non-traditional investors will also move into biotech, exactly for the reasons that I just mentioned. And also, I expect that we will see increasing and continued big investment from big pharma into biotech and through VCs, but also directly in partnering. I think there will be a much more flexible system where big pharma will be increasingly dependent on biotech to feed their pipelines and to really foster creativity. And there are reasons for that. I think the mindset and the culture and the organization that you need in a big pharmaceutical company is fundamentally different from what you need in biotech. And I think this topic is not often discussed, but it's very important because in late stage development and in commercialization, you operate in a highly regulated environment.
Mm-hmm.
So everything is very much regulated, and it should be like that. To be successful in early discovery, you need to foster a culture characterized by creativity and what I would almost call organized chaos, which is completely the opposite from what you want in late-stage development. And it is possible to reconcile it in a highly innovative organizational models, but few pharmaceutical companies moved on to really deploy this already. So I think they will be very dependent on biotech investments to feed the pipeline and to get the creative innovations that they need.
Great. No, those are great insights, especially looking at both domestic as well as international, deployment of capital as well as investments. So moving forward, I would like to kind of discuss where the next disruption you think will be coming from, both in healthcare or life sciences. And just some discussion points that I wanted to make was more on the technology, things like AI, big data, or when we're looking at bioengineering, things like biosensors, 3D printing, or 3D bioprinting, I should say, and then more into biotherapeutics themselves, like cell therapies, gene therapies, or nucleic therapies. I'd love to kind of understand your thoughts on where you think some of the next disruption is going to come from, and and which parts of the world might actually be playing a role in these type of technologies. So now we'll go back clockwise. So Dr. Tak, I'll start with you and see your thoughts on those type of disruptive technologies coming in.
Okay, well, probably the disruption will come from all of these, right? So first, there will be disruption coming from kind of conventional biomedical research, and the knowledge and the science are exploding, right? This is the best time in history to be active in biomedical research. It's totally amazing. So this will continue to feed disruptive innovation and change. There's no doubt about that. But then we get new players, as you alluded to already, like the tech companies, right, that move into the field of healthcare, including the Googles and Apple and Amazon and many, many others, actually, that bring a new way of thinking to the biomedical field. And I would expect quite a lot at the interface of tech and biotech. That's where a lot of disruption will come from. I think thinking about better identification of therapeutic targets with a stronger focus on human biology will advance the field. Better clinical development, so highly innovative experimental medicine clinical trials so that you can fail fast and learn as much as possible early on will be critical to reduce late-stage attrition. Because if you don't see a transformational effect in relatively small numbers of patients in a highly innovative trial where you measure the patient experience in the best way possible, and you look at soluble biomarkers, tissue biomarkers, sophisticated imaging biomarkers, and you look at it in an integrated way. So we need clearly, I think, innovation in statistics here, right? And we need to replace traditional thinking about p-values by what I would call the BOT, the bloody obvious test. If all these things that I just mentioned separate between placebo and active treatment, you might have an effective drug. And it provides the rationale, supports the rationale to then test it in a conventional way. If all of this is negative in, let's say, 15 patients per arm, right, in that kind of order, everything is negative, and you hit the pathway, but it doesn't translate into any change in patients. They don't feel better at all. There's no change in the biomarkers that are critical for this pathway. There are no changes in common final pathways that are known to be associated with clinical improvement. You know what? You don't have a transformational medicine, and you can stop it and put your money behind something that's more likely to work. So I think we will see innovation and disruption in clinical trial design, which will significantly reduce late-stage attrition, where the hundreds of millions of dollars are being wasted. Then I think we will use all the modalities that we need to use to hit the target, which could be actually innovative small molecules. I think there will be a future for small molecules again. But it may clearly include cell and gene therapy approaches, biopharmaceutical approaches, nanobodies, etc., what have you. But also digital data and analytics will be increasingly important, not only in terms of discovery, including artificial intelligence, but also in terms of digital treatments. And then at the interface of more or less traditional pharmaceutical thinking and tech is the world of bioelectronics. And I think there will be also kind of revolution in the field of bioelectronics. Some of my work in academia, I took all the way to big pharma, to a new joint venture called Galvani Bioelectronics. And a small group in my lab discovered actually the role of the vagus nerve, as an example, to control chronic inflammation. And we went all the way from in vitro experiments to knockout models to models where we gave mice nicotine to stimulate the cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway, to an electrical signal to stimulate the vagus nerve in rats. And we could show that 60 seconds of electronical stimulation would protect the joints in rats with severe arthritis. And then we took it to humans, right? This is an example of experimental medicine. And we implanted kind of pacemakers to stimulate the vagus nerve. And we could show that we could really drive remission, induce remission in a small subset of patients who were therapy resistant. So that is a paradigm shift, the world of bioelectronics. And then diagnostics, and my colleagues on the panel can speak about this as well. I think we will rethink how we classify disease. And it needs to be done in a molecular way rather than based on irrational signs and symptoms. And that will significantly, again, improve the benefit risk of our treatments for patients. So to summarize, I would expect quite a lot building on the revolution that we see, and in particular at the interface between tech and biotech and biomedical research.
Oh, thank you. No, this is amazing insights, especially moving towards better biomarkers to create better drugs. I think that's really where the next generation, treatments are heading. Dr. Chang, your insights on, where we are expecting disruption, and Dr. Tag mentioned quite a lot of it, but would love to hear your thoughts.
Right. I'd like to echo Paul's point. The interface between tech and healthcare is fascinating. And we have seen quite a lot of interest in this area already. I think in the coming couple of years, we will see the maturation of medical AI. So there have been a lot of attempts trying to look at either medical images or electronic health records, or looking at lab data and trying to identify biomarkers. So I think right now we are reaching a point that we have collected quite a lot of data, and there have been quite different teams trying to crack the problem. So sooner or later, we will see some real breakthrough coming out. And many other weaker teams will be weeded out during this period. Maybe they couldn't show a proof of concept, or they just couldn't raise enough money to carry forward. So the field will be changing in the coming years. And that would also apply to liquid biopsy. So there are many high profile companies in the past, and some of them, they are not able to generate satisfactory results. So I think this field is still attracting a lot of interest, but sooner or later, investors want to see real results. And these companies will need to carry on either through funding or going to IPO. So they will have to deliver what they promised to do.
Great. I think between both Dr. Tag and Dr. Chang, I think one of the commonalities is that small molecules are not going to go away. It's something that I'm hearing, and I think there's still as much space there as for large molecules. So very, very interesting thoughts there. Nat, what are your thoughts on where the disruption is going to be coming from in the future?
Yeah, well, I agree with and would echo all of the comments from Dr. Tak and Dr. Chang and the one you just made, Mahesh. Small molecules aren't going away. Lots of great work going there. But Also, the gene therapy, cell therapy, gene editing, immunotherapy fields, very early days still, and lots of activity. And I see that both in terms of therapeutic opportunities that we look at, but also on the tools and I guess, the manufacturing side. There's a whole host of tools that are developing to make those fields better.
Synthetic biology, I think there are just so many avenues within that space that hasn't even been explored yet. So definitely excited to see where those type of technologies are heading forward. So I mean, we're coming towards the end of our time, so I really would want to kind of hear some final thoughts about investments, life sciences, and if you have any thoughts also regarding the current situation of COVID-19. We'd just like to hear just your some final words and final thoughts from each of you. So again, we'll go back to our counterclockwise method, and we'll start with Nat and go forward. So Nat, any final thoughts?
Yeah, only to plow ahead. There is plenty of funding for early stage projects in all areas of biotech. It's just a matter of looking in the right places. Look for the firms and the people that have been involved in other early stage funding, and make sure, if you are early stage, make sure you look for other companies that have been in a similar stage, ideally in your field, and see who's funded them. So, poking around that way, then you can find those companies. You can see the multitude of other firms that have funded them. And then, you can look at those firms and their portfolios. I mean, everything's available online or Crunchbase, or, there's all sorts of resources to be able to find the early stage funders. Sometimes people get discouraged if they're in the early stage, you can't find funding. And I understand it's difficult. But a lot of times it's a matter of focusing your time and energy on talking to those that are active in the early stage.
Thank you so much. No, those are very important points. And Dr. Tak?
Yeah, some final remarks. So where is life sciences headed? So ideally, I think creating value goes hand in hand with changing the life of patients in the best way possible. And what is needed there is to focus, I think, increasingly on curing patients. In other words, to induce disease remission in the presence, or ideally in the absence of the need to continue treatment with a medical strategy. So we start to see that in oncology, for example, although the reality is that most patients are not cured. So that's where the huge opportunity is. I think the next opportunity is more difficult from a commercial perspective, but as a society, we need to figure this out, is prevention. In other words, identifying people at risk for a certain condition and intervene before it's necessary. And I've done it in rheumatology, for example, where we identified people at risk of developing rheumatoid arthritis as a prototypic immune-mediated inflammatory disease. And we gave them a biological or placebo, was rituximab actually. And with a single infusion, we could delay the onset of rheumatoid arthritis by 12 months. Well, now that is a cost-effective approach, actually. So I think we need to develop new paradigms focused on cure, prevention, and longevity and healthy aging. These are the challenges in the Western world and soon in other parts of the world as well, where I think the science is maturing and where there's a huge opportunity from a scientific and an investment perspective. So in terms of medical specialties, we spoke about oncology. And what we see is that many companies and biotech companies, pharma companies, all repeat each other's work, right? With many PD-1s and PD-L1s. There's a real opportunity to ask the question, why do checkpoint inhibitors do not work in most of the patients, right? And that's the whole world of the tumor microenvironment. And Dr. Chang touched upon it, right? The world of macrophages and stromal cells and Tregs, etc. And also actually the world of the gut microbiome. There's a very clear link between the interconnected biology of the gut on the one hand and the response at the distant site in the tumor on the other. And immune cells are primed in the gut in many cases, right? So there's this whole world of science that will help us to convert non-responders into responders. I think huge opportunity there. I think the next revolution after oncology needs to be in neurosciences, where the science is maturing, where there's an incredible and increasing unmet need worldwide, and where we start to understand the pathogenesis of conditions like Parkinson's disease, right, and many other conditions. And then, of course, thinking about where we started, or where you started, Mahesh, we are facing a pandemic at this moment. It's very clear that the world was not prepared to deal with the pandemic, in spite of all the warnings, right? And even if you think about security, billions have been spent on the military. Well, some of these billions could have been spent actually on being more prepared for a pandemic, which is a security risk in many ways. So I think we need to see a stronger focus on infections, including microbial resistance, et cetera. So that's where I will close. I think that we focus on the unmet need for patients and for society. We will identify the best investment opportunities.
Thank you. And I think that's a very great point to end the panel. And it's, I think that's where we have to focus and at least look forward to contributing as a community of scientists and entrepreneurs, moving things forward and making patients' lives better and increasing the quality of life for everyone. So I really appreciate all your time, all your insights. I think it's a great panel, and hopefully you enjoyed contributing and being part of this discussion. Thank you for being part of Newchip's demo day. I'm sure all the companies that are presenting today, especially the life science companies, would really enjoy your insights, as well as all the audiences that are coming from all over the world to listen to our companies present here today. So thank you again, and really appreciate your time, and looking forward to continuing the discussion and moving things forward and making lives better for all our patients and everyone in the future.